Hi everyone, my name is Rod Jans, and you're listening to the Get Inspired Talks podcast. To find out more about Get Inspired Talks, please see getinspiredtalks.com. Today's guest on the Get Inspired Talks podcast is John Nieuwenburg. Since 2004, John has coached more than 230 privately and family-owned businesses in Canada, the US, Australia, and the UK in the retail, construction, manufacturing, and professional services sectors. In an earlier life, John was the managing director of a BC-based retailer, and before that, he was an executive with a national menswear retailer. When John isn't coaching, he enjoys drinking wine, golfing, skiing, running, hanging out with his fiancée Jennifer, reading, he's read over 500 books, and traveling. Please welcome John Nieuwenburg.
It started when, I heard that Roger was looking for people to do talks, and I met him one time for lunch and presented him a kind of a 2-page outline of what I had in mind. And of course, he was quite surprised by the topic and the content, but he immediately agreed to take me on as one of his speakers, and he agreed to mentor me. So that was awesome. It was a very scary thing to do at the time. It didn't feel like a thing I should be doing given, what I do in my practice, in my business. It turned out to be a fantastic thing in that it really was something that helped me process and crystallize and heal in a big way. To have to think about and put together a compelling kind of presentation about it really helped me in a way as a kind of a therapeutic exercise. Just to kind of give you a little bit of sense of that, the PowerPoint presentation that I used to build the talk and do the rehearsing and that kind of thing was open for 22,000 minutes. I'll save you the arithmetic. That's 16 24-hour days. So between the middle of November and the end of May, I applied 22,000 minutes of writing, rehearsing, building, thinking. And so I mentioned that because, as you can imagine, that was part of the therapeutic process that I mentioned. Well, I'd been depressed for some time. For me, depression felt like, a tighter and tighter sort of closing of a tunnel where there was fewer and fewer, felt like options, and there was only one sort of possible outcome. I don't actually remember exactly how long I was, how long the cycle was, how long the slide was. I probably was actively thinking about suicide for at least a month, and I'd planned it out, and you can, it's crazy, but that's what you do. You actually sort of discover how to do it or what are the options, and I went and shopped for the materials that I needed, and at the end it became very deliberate and very intentional. Right on the day, I felt like I had nothing else left. It was the only thing available to me. And so in that sense, it's, you get to a kind of a conclusion, and you're not, for me, I wasn't debating that day. I was just simply going about what I'd set out to do. I probably spent 3-4 hours looking for a place where I could, a park or a tree or something like that. And I'd done some scouting, but hadn't settled on a place. But on the day, I drove out to a place in West Vancouver, and it took me about 3-4 hours to hike and find a place that worked. Yeah, and I got there, and the moment of it's kind of a paradox because it's probably the bravest thing you ever do. I know that sounds weird, but the actual, jumping is a real conscious act. It isn't an accident. It's a very deliberate kind of thing. And you, as they say, pull the pin, and that's what you do. The paradox about depression is it robs you of your ability to think. It robs you of your judgment. It robs you of your ability to be, to think critically. And so that's ironic because when I try to describe it or I feel kind of helpless or hopeless to describe it for the reasons that I just mentioned, other than you increasingly become helpless. You increasingly feel like, although I knew I could describe. I could think about what I needed to do to, sort of turn the corner. There was some condition that prevented me from doing that, and that's what I think depression is that even though notionally you know what to do, your brain can't get engaged in doing those things. In retrospect, I know that I've had several episodes of depression in my life. The one that I had in my late teens, in those days, I was, you were just sort of considered lazy or hopeless or, a ne'er-to-well, so to speak, that because in those days it was thought of as a character flaw. There was something wrong with you, right? And in those days that you kind of accepted that might be the case. Today, I recognize that it's literally an illness and a mental condition that's causing you to act out this way, and it appears that way, but in fact, the illness is invisible, and so there's no tangible evidence of it, and all you see is the behavior, and the behavior looks a lot like, someone who's got a bunch of flaws. And that's the paradox. That's the the thing that we as a society are becoming better at understanding, I think, and generally more appreciative that that it's an illness. We're certainly not there yet, in my view, but I think we're more sensitive to it. I fell to the ground. I might have been out or unconscious for a minute or two or three or some period of time, because then I woke and realized that I was alive, and my neck was very, very, very painful. I'd gotten a severe rope burn, and that pain was so severe I just couldn't contemplate, making the knot again and then putting that around my neck. I know it's I recognize the irony of that. But my neck hurt so much that I couldn't bear the thought of putting a rope against that again for any length of time. And so I just sort of, gathered my wits and hiked out of the park and got in my car and drove home. My wife, Jennifer, when she came home that day, she very soon noticed there was something going on with, hey, John, what happened to your neck? And I made up a really bad story, bad excuse. I got sort of whiplash from a branch or something while I was hiking. And she immediately sort of did a full 360 around me kind of poking around and recognized what had happened. She left the apartment and went outside and made a couple of phone calls, phoned a brother of mine, and which at the time I was very, 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 I was embarrassed and angry that she did that, but it in fact turned out to be the very best thing she could have done. But in the moment, it's embarrassing. Up until then, I'd been fairly, functioning at a fairly high level, right? I was still engaged in the work that I do and putting on a good show, so to speak. And it was pretty clear at that point that there was no avoiding having to face it head on. It was, it's kind of my perspective of it was a shameful thing and a very difficult thing to articulate, and so it was something I hid, something that I, as best I camouflaged, really. In retrospect, that's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do actually is seek out someone who can help you. Seek out whether that's professional help or someone who's capable, empathetic, gifted enough to have a conversation with you and help you express yourself. Well, I probably should reach out more than I do, but I've become very good, I think, at recognizing the early symptoms and responding quicker, not letting it develop, not letting it, it feels like a slide. You're just literally sliding down a slippery slope, and the slope gets steeper and faster and quicker. But if you catch it in the early, you can, kind of in a more mindful way, redirect how you think. And so I've just become better at doing that. And that's, in some part, Rod, because it's such a painful thing that I'll do anything to avoid it. And now that I appreciate it, it's like I don't want to go there again.
One of my favorite
lines to my wife is, I haven't got time for the pain.
Exactly. I haven't got time for the pain or the energy to take it on again, man. Ron, it's so hard to look back on that, hard to think back on that time and to recognize what and who I was at the time. In such a different place today that literally it's mind-boggling to me that I could have been in a place where I was feeling that way. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing is I'm very aware of, I have a set of affirmations that I visit with regularly. I use that to define the best me I can be. And, I'll be frank with you, sometimes I look at it and think, who is that? Because I don't feel very much like that person, but it helps me stay on track. It's sort of a GPS or a North Star. It's aspirational. Sometimes I think about it as who I'm becoming, but that's, it's what I stand for. It's who I expect myself to be. And so when you have a clear picture of that, it's easier to stay in touch with it. I promise I'm not always that guy, but it works. Ben Franklin had a set. He called them 13 virtues. He wrote it in the 1700s, and when he died, part of what he said was that, well, I didn't always live up to my expectations or up to my standards or up to the 13 virtues, but I'm a better man for trying. And so that's what I agree with that sentiment exactly. I'm a better man because I try every day.
I like that.
And so one of the things I'd recommend for everybody is that, do you have a written definition of the best you can be? And so Dr. Spock has a little thing about that. Today you're you. That's truer than true. There's no one alive who's youer than you. If I'm talking to someone about it, I'll say, do you have a written definition of the best you can be? And, as you can imagine, if you were to ask 100 people that, two might actually have it documented. And so that practice, that process of articulating that in and of itself helps, points you in the direction of who you want to be, as opposed to that slippery place of where you certainly don't want to go to. Well, it's certainly easier to move towards an aspiration. But here's the thing, Rod, no matter how much willpower you have, it's not enough. No matter how much discipline any of us have, none of us have enough discipline, because it's a very limited resource. It exhausts itself quickly. And so, I forget exactly who said this, but all success is the product of habit, right? It's the habits that you have. But how do you get from where you are today to having that habit or forming that habit? And what I've learned is that structure is the proper replacement for discipline. And so structure is a system, and structure could be having 16 affirmations as I do, because that helps me move in the direction of the habit I wish to have. And so we often are hard on ourselves because we think, oh man, how come I don't have enough discipline or don't have enough willpower? Well, the fact is we don't. It's just a fact, right? And so when you recognize that and then say, well, how do I succeed even with the amount of willpower I have? Well, I've learned the replacement for that is structure. Having a system, some mechanism that supports you as you move towards a new habit. It is remarkable how many business owners have suffered through some form of mental illness. It's a very, very, very hard thing to be an entrepreneur. We're always struggling against, overcoming the odds and trying to get things to work the way we need them or want them to work. And so one of the things that I see a lot of is business owners being willing to talk to me because they recognize that I've been there, done that. Becoming vulnerable is actually the thing that inspires the greatest level of trust that people can have in you, because people will then feel comfortable, capable, willing to open themselves up. So at the time, it was knee-knocking scary to do, not just to do the talk. I don't mean that. I mean in the sense of preparing and declaring that I was willing to take that on. But in retrospect, it was the very best thing I could have done. I just didn't know it at the time. Ron, it absolutely is. And that's the truth, is that lots of us walk around with struggles, and lots of us have secrets and don't have a way or a capacity to open up. And when you show them a way to do that or invite them, then it leads to very good things. I've learned that being vulnerable as much as anything as the most powerful thing that you can do, although it's the scariest thing in the moment. Well, there's a couple of things. One is to, at a personal level, one of the things that I'd urge you to think about is the National Institute of Health in the United States has 250 labels they've declared or people use as words to describe mental illness. Nuts, crazy. What are some other ones that, so the first thing is to become mindful of shifting your own language, to be aware that, this language matters, and in so many ways we're becoming better as a culture and as a society to be more respectful and, towards women and people of different origins and people in the lesbian and gay and community. Well, one of those things is also about people that have a mental illness, and so let's not use slur and slang and generally disrespectful words mindlessly often. But so the first thing is to become more mindful of using language that doesn't denigrate mental illness. That starts with that idea. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to get a little smarter about it yourself. 1 in 4 people, at minimum 1 in 5 people, have had a mental illness in their lifetime. And so every single one of us knows, typically I think the theory is that every one of us knows 150 people. Well, that means at least 30 of those people are people that have had a mental illness. And so becoming mindful helps us recognize that it's people in our immediate lives, immediate family. And then the third thing, if you want to act on it and support something, let me recommend an organization called Heads Up for Guys. It's affiliated with UBC, a professor there, and they're fundraising. Although they're associated with UBC, of course, they're not funded by UBC, and so they're looking for funding. And if I could point you towards headsupguys.org, that's heads, HEADS, up, UPGUYS.org. Let me recommend that you go to the site. So there's 3 things that you could do if you're looking to answer the question of what can I do about it.